Hello and welcome to our climb to 2000 elo. Our opponent has the white pieces. They have kicked things off with knight f3. I see no reason not to play f5, the Dutch defense. Okay, they've played g3, which indicates to me they would like to situate their bishop on g2 and have this lovely, nice long diagonal. I'm going to continue by developing my knight to f6, controlling more central squares. Now we play e6 to solidify this structure, get our bishop on e7, looking to castle. I also could have maybe played d6 to get e5 in one go, if our opponent hasn't played d4 and c4. That might have been a nice idea as well, but I'm just going to keep things nice and easy by developing the bishop to e7. What's that cap you're wearing, Andrew? Well, this is the logo for the Four Corner Club. What's the Four Corner Club, Andrew? Well, I'm glad you asked. Check us out on Instagram at Four Corner Club. And if you live in London or near London, pop on by for a live game. Okay, so our opponent's playing a little unusually here. There's no real reason to want the queen and the bishop on this same diagonal this early. d3 is a little bit tentative. Fine, they might want to push e4. I could play d5 to kind of reinforce this. I think I'll just play in the usual way, why not? d6, we'll eventually get in e5. We want to be able to meet e4 with e5 if we can. And at the moment, that looks easy enough. Okay, so this is a very unusual move. The knight doesn't really want to be on this square. It's not really achieving all that much. And I can easily kick it with e5, which helps me get what I want. And the knight can't capture here on f5, because when I push e5, now my bishop defends this square. So I'm now asking the knight to figure out where he wants to go. Down to c6 would of course be bad. Here's pretty awkward. Or you could just leave it there and drop a piece. And now I'm kicking your other knight. Now I'm kicking your other knight. Okay, so your knight drops down to b5, probably looking to pick up this pawn. So if I kick the knight, it's likely that I would lose the pawn. That's perfectly okay, because we're already up a knight. But I could be really annoying and just play c5. Holding on to the pawn. And also knight c6 might prompt my opponent to trade here. And sure, we get these awkward double pawns, but we are trading down more material, which is useful for us. But I actually quite like this annoying move, c5, reinforcing the pawn and suggesting that I'm going to be playing a6 on the next move, and your knight isn't going to be able to come to c3, isn't going to be able to return via d6. This is all covered, and c7 doesn't work, and so the knight is likely to end up on a3, which is a very uncomfortable square indeed. Okay, so yes, so I'm going to kick this knight first. The knight will come back to a3. And okay, so it's likely that my opponent would like to capture here, and I'd recapture with my pawn. It would be nice if I could recapture with my knight, like this. But we have to assume if I position my knight on c6, that my opponent would take it. But then after captures, I can play c5 again. I do kind of like that. It is pretty annoying for my opponent to have to deal with that. And the more pieces my opponent trades off at this point, the better, because we're up a piece. Okay, so now, as I said, I don't really want to capture back with the pawn. It would be nice to capture with the knight. And if my opponent plays e3, do I have a response to that? Where would the knight be coming back to? The knight could simply come back to c6. That's a little bit of a waste of tempo, but I think I prefer that to this awkward pawn structure of capturing with the pawn and having two isolated and doubled pawns. And I don't know, maybe there's a world in which the knight actually wants to reroute himself via e6 to another square, but I don't think so. I think if I capture here and they push e3, I just bring the knight back and everything's okay. I think we'll do this. I'm expecting e3. Notice this knight still doesn't have many good squares, although c4 is maybe a temporary outpost. I do have b5 though, although I'd have to move my rook out the way and not hang that piece before playing b5. Okay. So my opponent hasn't kicked me yet. Can this knight come anywhere particularly annoying from his c4 outpost? This is covered. This is covered. This is covered. So what's left for me to do? Well, developing this bishop, but as I develop this bishop, I would hang the pawn. So I maybe want to play queen c7, which now hangs onto this pawn and allows me to bring the bishop out. I'm also looking at maybe eventually playing d5, kicking my opponent's knight again. If I play d5, I don't know. But okay, my opponent's rook has come to the b file, so I think I'll just go ahead and do the same thing. Now I can push b5, attacking their knight. Their knight would be forced to come back to somewhere like e3. Okay, this is a little annoying. This is a little annoying. But not so bad. Let's kick the knight. Back to a3 perhaps. I think I like this as an idea. e3 is also an available option, but then you are kind of just preventing any play with your pawns here. And if this trade happens, that's kind of fine for me. The bishop holds onto this pawn. And what I'm looking to do now is activate the light squared bishop, which is normally a bit of a problem piece in the Dutch. It's pretty difficult for it to find much activity, rather like in the French. But now I can simply play bishop b7 and maybe exchange one of my bad pieces for what I would say is white's best piece, this rather vicious diagonal. This white bishop is kind of seeing everything along the h1, a8 diagonal, and I might look to remove it. Okay, so one thing I have to think about before I make this move is when I move the bishop, I undefend f5, but currently this is being looked after by my knight. So another thing I would consider is, once I make this move, could my opponent remove this knight so that this becomes undefended? Well, they would likely need e3 in order to do that, and they can't easily play that at the moment because their knight prevents this pawn push. So I'm looking quickly at other squares that this knight can go to that might be slightly problematic, and I don't really see any. Again, if this trade occurs, I'm not too worried. I just replace the pawn, the bishop sees a little bit more activity, and there's nothing too dangerous on this open file at the moment. So I think I can just go ahead and play bishop b7 and look to trade these pieces off. Then it's a question of, do I want to take back with my queen or with my rook? And I think probably with my queen. Or my rook. Because if I move my rook, then let's say my queen moves somewhere and my bishop gets out of the way, I could swing the rook over here eventually onto the f-file and start building pressure along my opponent's f-file. But the nice thing about the queen is I could then maybe try to initiate another trade immediately, bringing my queen to the center. And remember, the more trades we can make at this point, the better, because we're already up material, because our opponent gave us a free knight all the way back here when they just decided not to move their knight. Okay, so they block. What I notice when they block is that removes a key defender from their knight, although it is defended twice, because the bishop is behind the queen. So I'm thinking my rook doesn't really need to be on this file. It doesn't look like this file is going to open up anytime soon. And this looks like a rather good square for my knight, if I could get my knight here. And also, by moving this knight, I could get my bishop onto f6, which might be quite nice. Pushing this doesn't really achieve much. In fact, it loosens this pawn slightly because I lose a defender. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to rotate my knight back to d7. This probably isn't the best move, but both my knight and my rook defend the f5 pawn, and now I can bring my bishop to this diagonal, where I could maybe... Okay, so now that the knight is on d7, I could take back with the knight, which does improve that piece slightly. Maybe that's quite nice. The question is, do I want my knight on e5 instead? If I capture here... Long term, is this a good square? I don't know, capturing back with the pawn... The thing I like about capturing back with the pawn is then I don't end up with an isolated pawn. This pawn rejoins his neighbors over here on the B and A file. Whereas if I took back with the knight, yes, I'd have a small outpost for the knight, but then I have to worry about this this isolated D pawn in future because it wouldn't have an E or a C pawn adjacent to him to look after it. So I kind of like taking back this way, which is what we imagined earlier on. Okay, and now look, this idea becomes particularly dangerous. Putting the bishop on the same diagonal as my opponent's queen, and what am I threatening? Well, knight takes on f3. Okay, and my opponent falls for this. Knight takes on f3 is a game-ending move. I take with check. My opponent must address the check, and now we snatch the queen. And fine, we lose effectively 2 pieces because we lose the knight, but the queen is far more valuable. Remember, we gained a pawn in the exchange as well, so we gained 1 and 9, and our opponent got the knight and the bishop, so they gained 6. 9 in most cases is better than 6. And also remember, we are still simply up a piece. And our opponent made another mistake by recapturing with their rook, which is worth 5, and our bishop is only worth 3, so we can go ahead and just make another simple exchange, and if they come back with the bishop, which I'm sure they will, is there a better move here? Ah, I notice another good move. There is this fork on these 2 pieces, but it is protected by the bishop twice, so I don't know if I can make that work. Maybe by... Might be quite nice being able to, like... No, I think I'll just bring my knight in. Time is quite low. I'll bring my knight in and look to just trade more pieces off the board. But yeah, this is a little bit of a crucial mistake here. All right. So this comes with check. I can go ahead and grab this first and ignore the attack on my queen. Okay, so my opponent doesn't grab the knight. So I'm just going to do this and check again, because if you capture like this, I ruin your pawn structure. They don't. Okay, well, now I'm going to attack your knight, and then I'll be able to save my knight. This knight doesn't have any dangerous moves. This is just a free knight. Wondering if I can... If I need to grab it now. Yeah, I should probably just grab it now. Give this up. Walk my pawn up the board. Start targeting my opponent's weak pawns. And yeah, this was a key moment back here when the queen ended up on the same diagonal. If there wasn't a check here, I mean, even if there wasn't a check here, that would still be quite vicious, right? Just, I can move the knight kind of anywhere with impunity because the bishop opens up on the queen. Okay, this was actually a nice move. You know, you're threatening to win the rook here, but let's see. I think I just want to go here, try and infiltrate, move this rook off. Once we've made this trade, I think I should just be quite good. I'm going to have to start playing a little bit more quickly, but that's fine. 40 seconds is plenty of time. Okay, so my opponent allows me to hold on to the rook, so we will do that. They're still not taking my knight, which I find highly unusual. So I will save it if I can. I will save this knight. I don't know why they're not capturing it. That's a free piece. It's a free piece. We just have to watch out that we don't stalemate our opponent. That's a free piece. They can move the pawn. And that's checkmate. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments where you're at with your chess journey. How did you get into chess? What's your current elo? What are your elo goals? And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.